Hello, this is Jenny Clark with Solvability. Today's Florida GovCon podcast, I've got Rich Wilkinson of Uninet, and we're going to be talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which really is the whole reason that I do the type of work I do. It's called Answering the PM's Question. Rich and I both believe that the program manager is the person that we need to be making sure we're providing the most support all the time, because if the program manager doesn't have what he or she needs to do her job, we're not taking care of our customer, and so we're failing in what we're trying to do. So Rich, how are you doing today?
I'm well. And how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm just thinking back to how long we've known each other, and we won't talk about how young and brilliant we used to be. We'll talk about how wise we are today.
There you go.
So, Rich, you and I go back to our Deltec days when I was working with Deltec and met you at some of the user conferences. And also when I was doing the Rocket City government contracting conferences, you were always one of the first people that I would sign up to be a speaker at that, because you're so entertaining, have so much depth and background across this whole federal contracting sphere. So I'm really looking forward to having you at the Florida GovCon Summit, February 28th and March the 1st in Orlando. So, Rich, why don't you tell people a little bit about what you do, how you got here, and why we've got this great connection?
Sure. The good old days. Actually, a lot of those days are just old now, not so good necessarily. But it was a lot of fun going to Huntsville to the Rocket City conference. I started out in GovCon as a contracting officer. I spent 8 years at the Naval Air Systems Command as a contracting officer, mostly in anti-submarine warfare. Like all junior contracting officers, I started out in services and then ended up buying a lot of R&D type hardware that ended up on submarines and airplanes and in shore-based networks, primarily acoustic signal processing stuff. If you ever saw an old movie called The Hunt for Red October,
I remember that
that
one.
computer aboard the submarine was very close to the computer that I spent the last 3 years of my career writing the production contract for.
Hmm.
Uh, the chief of naval intelligence really wanted to know where Tom Clancy got all of his information for that book. And as it turns out, he was just a guesser, but he was a really, really good guesser, because even some of the classified stuff was really close to reality.
Well, it's
I
amazing
jumped the
how you
fence, though.
see that.
Go ahead.
It's
I'm
amazing
sorry.
how you see that. When I was out in San Diego, I went on the Midway, which is now a museum, and it was
Hmm.
fascinating to go around to these different parts and things like that. They even had like little black plaques that had the contract number and the serial number and the company that produced it. So you can't help but see the history of federal contracting if you're into this hardware side.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of the stuff that was highly, highly classified then is on my iPad today.
Hmm.
It's just, it's been overcome by the progress of technology, but it was amazing stuff back in those days. And I won't mention the decade, but it was a couple ago.
Hmm.
When I jumped the fence, I went to work for a local defense contractor in the Washington, D.C. area, a company by the name of Mantech. Spent a couple years there as a controller, installing a relatively new accounting system called System One from Deltec. And then I worked my way through general physics and Atlantic research and ended up at CSC. And I put Deltec's System One product in all of those companies, including CSC, in their systems group, about 13,000 people.
Yeah, I
It was
remember those days when we had the black and white monitors, and we were so excited when they changed the screen so it had colors in it. And
oh yeah,
at
even if it
that
was just
time,
green.
yeah, it was the, that was the standard. That was where I think I learned everything about federal contracting, from having worked that system, because it showed me the rules as part of the process. And it's just amazing how this has evolved over a long period of time.
Yeah, after 10 years working for defense contractors installing Deltec products, I went to work there, and I was there for 15 years. The last 5 years or so, I was their VP for government contracting and spent a lot of time giving the designers and the business analysts input, trying to keep the products aligned with the regulations, keep everything compliant. I also spent a good bit of time scouring the industry for products that we could bring into the Deltek family or interface with the Deltek products. But over time, I became disenchanted with that approach to an ERP because we ended up with so many moving pieces. By the time I left there, it was CostPoint, their own T&E product, which is another piece. Budgeting and planning product was another piece. The graphic visualization product was another piece. The ad hoc report writer was another piece. And they were all built on different technologies, different security models. When I left Deltek, I had to basically work out a non-compete. So I spent a couple of years at a CPA firm doing compliance work. And I got to know Uninet during that period of time and absolutely fell in love with the concept that they were developing on and promoting, which was one database, one application, one technology stack, and almost as important as all the other stuff, one security model. So you didn't have to figure out different roles based on different products or different looks and feel, different technologies, so that people didn't have access to something they shouldn't have in one product and denied access in another product. So I actually became an advisor to Uninet long before I came to work here, and gave them input as they developed the financial package to go along with the time and expense package they had been selling for a number of years. And got there as fast as I could. And I've been with Uninet almost a year now and having the time of my life. And from the inside, I can say that this product is even better looking from the inside than it was from the outside looking in. And there's not very many products you can say that about.
Absolutely. I think what's so important about Uninet is their beginnings came from supporting the project manager, and then they evolved into having the accounting back end added to it. Because so many people complain, well, I can't get what I need from my accounting system because it's got to process this and process that. But with Uninet, I could even look at somebody's timesheet as soon as they clicked it, and it's included on my reporting, right?
Exactly. In fact, serving the project manager is absolutely as important in Uninet's universe as serving the back office and the financial folks. Both constituencies have to have what they need. And unfortunately, project managers don't get to pick accounting systems an awful lot of the time.
Yeah.
That gets chosen by the back office. And inevitably, when that happens, the project manager's needs come second. And I think that's a mistake.
Well, I would agree with you on that one because there was when I worked at another company and I was using the Deltek software, it was the state of the art at that point in time. But I can remember the retired Air Force colonel from downstairs saying he needed some reports in order to provide to his project to his customer, and it was like it hit me like a brick about how he was so frustrated with that I couldn't produce what he needed. And I ended up doing it, but I had to pull it into spreadsheets and add it all up. And I still didn't feel like nobody should have to go through that level of work. And no project manager should be having to keep their own set of books.
In fact, shadow systems, and every project manager, whether they will admit it or not, keeps some form of a shadow system so that they can know where they are. In fact, that's really the only question a project manager has. Where am I?
Let's talk about what you're going to talk about. This is all about answering the program manager's question. And you said exactly that. The project manager always wants to know where am I, because they're taking on the proposal was probably created by somebody else. Time has passed since that proposal was bid. Personalities have changed. Some of the emphasis of the job they were supposed to provide for the customer needs to be worked out with the customer. And so they're dealing with a budget they didn't create, with a workforce that maybe doesn't even exist compared to what was on the proposal. And if they can't respond quickly in the early stages of that contract to answer the questions that their customer answers, it sours the relationship from the very beginning, doesn't it?
You're absolutely right. It does. And I've seen more than a few contracts go south in the first 90 days because of a bad start. The reality is everybody would like to think that the proposal becomes the plan as soon as the award is made. And while it should be true, the fact is that proposal is probably 6 months old
At
and
least.
stuff happens. People leave, they take other jobs, they get promoted. Uh, all kinds of things happen. Even external events influence how that contract's actually going to be performed once you've won it. There's nothing I can do about that 6 month lag between writing a proposal and winning the award. But the day that award comes in, that original proposal is nothing but a baseline. It's not the plan anymore. That
Mhm.
plan needs to be adjusted, and that plan needs to be a living document that's adjusted at least every week, probably more often than that. In order to do that, you got to know where you are. Now, you'll notice that I don't talk about the program manager's questions. It's not plural. They really only have one. That question has a lot of facets, but it's really just one question. Where am I? Where am I today? Where was I yesterday? Where will I be tomorrow? But where am I? I think you've probably heard this story before, but one of the very first software demos I did after coming to Uninet was about a 150 person company. It was a NAVC contractor, and they were doing some pretty sensitive work for some ship program offices at NAVC. We were doing a software demo, and I thought we were probably knocking it out of the park for the CEO and the CFO. They were very engaged, very excited about what they were seeing. They were a little bit tired of the dog's breakfast, as CEO of a certain company used to call the software suite they were using, because it was different technologies, different look and feel, and every one different security models. And they kept having to shove data back and forth between the ERP and the time and expense system. And they weren't even using the budgeting and planning system. It was still sitting on the shelf, never been implemented. And the COO was sitting across the table from me, and he just looked miserable. He looked like he just wanted to be almost anywhere except where he was. And there was a lull in the conversation at the other end of the table, and I looked at him across the table and said, "Tell me what your problems are. Tell me why you look so miserable right now." And he looked a little startled, and he said, "Because nobody's talking about what I need. I need to know where I am, and I need to know it on a real-time basis." And I said, "Well, what do you get right now?" He says, "Right now, I know where I am twice a month, and it's a week old when I get it, maybe 2 weeks." I said, "What do you want?" He said, "I want to know where I am all the time." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, what if I could show you how you could know where you are every single morning as of the close of business the previous day?" And he leaned across the table. I mean, his face was a foot from mine. He said, "I would kill for that." And it
Uh-oh.
made me a little nervous. The guy was a former Navy SEAL, and I think he was serious. But that's what we do. The Uninet product, because it's all one database, because everything's in one place, the time data, the expense data, even expense requests for trips not yet taken are already in the system along with the estimate of the trip expense. I can see so much more, and I can see it every day. Now, it's only as good as the company's time card compliance. If nobody puts their time cards in until the end of the pay period, it's not going to be any better probably than what they were using. But if your compliance is good, and we give you the tools to do that, to help make that compliance good, you can see every day where you were yesterday. They ended up choosing Uninet over several other choices, and they're very happy with what they've done. I talked to that same COO just a few weeks ago, and he said, I asked him, "Can you see where you are now?" And he said, "I can." He says, "It's not where I want it to be, but it's getting better every week, And he said, I know so much better where I am today. And it isn't just the actuals, it's also the plan, because he can see who's working on the project in a grid. He can see how much they're supposed to be working on it and what they're actually doing. He can see what they're planned to work on it next week, next month, next quarter, and what that's going to cost him. And he can see it all in one place. He doesn't have to go into a different system to get visuals or graphics. He doesn't have to go into another system to see the time data and something else if he wants an ad hoc report. It's all one login. It's one database.
And that's so powerful, especially on the comparison of budget to actuals, because every time I've ever had to work with any systems, I had a budget in one spreadsheet, and then I would dump down my actuals to compare them to where I was. But the fact that that takes me a day to do it means it's already outdated. And there's also this whole feeling of when you do a budget, do you have each contract budget individually and roll it up, or do you just start from the top down? So I think that's really one of the big issues that people have when they're looking at, am I on target? The biggest issue, once they've conquered the idea of could I get my actuals faster, is what's my process for keeping up with that budget? And I think that's a lot of philosophy too.
It is. And certainly there are lots of different ways to do budgets and plans. You can do them top down and without the granularity. You can do them from the bottom up. Our basic approach is if you manage people and work, then the project's results will be what you want. But if you manage them from the bottom up, now some companies just, that's not their culture. They're going to manage from the top down, and that's fine. We can do that too. But the companies that do manage John and Harry and Sally and Susan and the work they're doing for their manager, and then roll that together with the other managers and the other directors and the other VPs and roll it up to the project, they're the ones that we see that are really the most successful. They're the ones that know where they are and where they're going and where they're going to be come this time next year.
I think you've got a really good point with that, because when I talk to people about how you should manage as a federal contractor, and I'm trying to be simplified because most of the companies I work with do tend to be smaller, what I'm trying to do is say, right now, here's the people you have on your workforce. And unless you win a new contract or you lose something, you know that those people are still going to be on payroll 90 days from now. So you know what your costs are 90 days from now, and you know what your revenue is going to be 90 days from now. And so what I try to explain, and I think you and I talked about that on a number of different occasions, is I'm always looking at what I call labor utilization. I've got a workforce of 50 people, 3 people are on G&A or overhead, and everybody else is direct billable. And my main thing is to make sure that I make the right amount of money off of everybody that's working on a billable contract, and I kind of keep an eye on my labor utilization percentage. But am I explaining that right, or is there a better way to say it?
No, you're exactly right. Yeah. Before I was a contracting officer, I spent a few years in banking. I kind of gloss over that because it doesn't add anything to my resume. I don't even put it on there anymore. But the first thing they teach you in banking is you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. And that translates pretty well. If you take care of your people and their utilization at the lowest level, then you're not going to have problems with the things as they roll up. If you've got problems at the top, trace it down. Chances are it's happening down there at the bottom somewhere. So for us, at least, our most successful clients manage that way. They manage increments and people, and they build it from the bottom up, and it works. Those companies are also the companies that are the most flexible. And you and I are going to talk about this in a lot more detail at your GovCon conference, the last day of February, first day of March. But we have a problem in this industry. We are not very good at shrinking. We tend to grow very easily, and we know how to do that. But shrinking requires a skill set that we've not developed because we haven't had to do it very much. And we'll talk a lot more about that at the conference. But that's one of the things that Uninet's philosophy our visibility that you have into the organization will permit you to do, because you can see right down at a very granular level where things have to change or where things are changing. And you can see it today. I've been in the same situation you were in, where I had to download actuals into a spreadsheet and compare them to my budget, because my budget wasn't in the system, to figure out, how I'm doing or where I am. But I also know that, first of all, I had to wait till the end of the pay period, and then I had to wait for that data to be processed, which took 3 or 4 days, and then another day before they would give me access to it so I could download it. And some of the data I was downloading was from 3 weeks ago. Now that's stale at the very best. So
Yeah, and you always feel like I always felt like I'd get myself so involved that I think, well, now I'll update the budget so it's where I was. So I've changed all those things to actual. So it was almost like I was adjusting my budget to equal my actual all the time, which is pointless.
yeah, and there are still a lot of systems that don't modify your budget for you as you move forward. And you have the option always in Uninet to look at your budget as it originally was, but the default view is actuals through today, budget from there on.
Boy,
So
that
you
makes
don't
a
have to
difference.
you don't have to keep modifying the budget to bring it up to date with your actuals. And this is not in pay periods or months. If I pull up a view on the screen that shows what we call a periodic JSR, something I would have killed for in a previous life, where I have a column for every month showing me literally a JSR type display month by month by month. Up through today, it's actuals. Tomorrow and on, it's my budget or my plan. And I don't mean the latest closed pay period. I mean today.
Oh,
If
that's a
I'm
big
looking at it on the 18th of the month, the 1st through the 17th are actuals. The 18th and on are budgets.
Wow. Because what you're saying is people can see the trend. Whenever I try to explain to people why they're not making money, a lot of the people I'm working with are still using QuickBooks, and I'm trying to get them to where they understand their processes well enough so when they grow, they would consider going on to something more extensive, so they'd really have the information they need. And what I find is they love the report called the profit and loss by month. Because when
Mhm.
I open that up and show that to them, I'm saying, did you really lose 60,000 in January and make 350,000 in February and lose? It's like then they start to see none of their information looks accurate because of a lot of timing differences and things.
Right.
And so what you're saying is Uninet, they could get in the habit from the get-go of looking and saying, hey, last month we had 1,800 hours. This month we had 1,772. Next month we have 1,900. But you can start to see a trend and know what's going on. And you say, oh, it was January. Well, we had New Year's Day and a lot of people didn't come back to work. And you can see what's going on and think about the causes.
Oh yeah. In fact, that's one of the things when I show people the planning, and we take a few employees, John and Harry and Sally and Susan, and we plan them out for a few months. I do it in FTEs, and I just put ones in the cells.
Mm-hmm.
1 person month for John and 1 person month for Harry, and so forth every month. And then when I flip the view to hours, they look at it and they go, wait a minute, why are the hours different from month to month? And they go, because you don't have the same number of days in every month. And some months have holidays in them. So this month's 160 hours, that month's 168, the month after that's 152. Yeah, you want me to take those things into consideration? They go, oh yeah, that's cool.
Well, it makes it so much more meaningful when you can say, oh, now I understand what's going on. And I always tell people January and February as months usually are pretty bad because there's so many holidays. But get well month is March because it's usually a long month too.
Well, you get a double whammy too, because in January, your actual costs are going to include some payroll expenses, payroll taxes that are paid at a very high rate, but they're only paid on the first $5,000 or $7,000 of income.
Right.
So in January, your fringe benefit costs are sky high and your labor base is lower than normal. It's not unusual to have a 45 or 50% fringe rate in the month of January And then by the end of the year, it's down to the 32 or 33 you had budgeted. And it's all because of the timing of those tax payments.
Hmm. And so
And
much
that's
of
why we
this,
have target rates and actual rates and manage them differently.
yeah, there's so many things that you could be looking at, and it's like it's getting people to the point where they understand what the basics are so that they can get on with, a higher powered system.
Yeah.
Guy to
And
teach them to
that,
drive first, and then they can have, a Hummer.
yeah, exactly. And that trend income statement you were talking about, where you can see your income statement month by month in columns,
Right.
a lot of systems will do that for you. In fact, just about every system I've ever worked with will do that for you. Even the old System 1 would do that in its later years. But Uninet takes it all the way down to the project, task, subtask level. So I can go down to a subtask and see a P&L for that subtask month by month.
Yeah, because you've got to solve the problem there.
Exactly. And that's why we go to that level of accuracy I was talking about, where we take into account scheduled vacations. If somebody schedules their vacation for July, when you budget them for one FTE in July, it won't be 160 hours, it'll be 80,
Hmm.
because they've scheduled 2 weeks off that month. And that rolls up. Holidays roll up, scheduled vacations roll up, those kinds of things. Because if that estimate, if that plan is not really, really accurate at the very bottom, it won't be accurate when you roll it up to the top.
Yeah, you're right. And we really have to manage things on a contract by contract basis. Ask our project managers to make sure that everybody they've got working that's supposed to be billable is as billable.
You just dropped out on me. I'm kind of hoping that's a microphone problem. But I'll sort of wrap up for you. I've really enjoyed my time so far at Uninet, and I'm looking forward to several more years doing exactly what I'm doing now, getting the people to see the benefit of a single database, single application, a single security model, and visibility. There's one other thing I want to mention that the Uninet concept does. When we license the ERP for the organization. We don't license a certain number of seats of this, a certain number of seats of that. It is driven by the number of people in the organization, but if you license Uninet for a 150 person organization, if you want to have 150 people be project managers, go for it. That's not going to cost more. So we've removed the financial disincentive to bring new people along into new disciplines as your company grows. And that's very important for mid-sized companies and companies that are growing, trying to get ready to take the next step.